there is a truth that only those who have loved a narcissist truly understand. At some point, you stop fighting, you stop crying, you stop explaining, you stop trying to fix something only you were holding together. You simply stop. And in that moment, what feels calm on the outside becomes an earthquake inside their world. Because up until now, a narcissist has always measured their worth through your reactions, your anger, your sadness, your remaining hope. So when you walk away without leaving any signal behind, the first thing they feel isn't anger. It is a quiet, creeping panic. Because in reality, your silence is not just silence. It is the confirmation that they are no longer the center of your life. Once they can't read your emotions, can't predict your reactions, can't shake your balance the way they used to, they begin to feel pushed outside the boundaries of a world they once believed you couldn't live without them in. And from there, the fear of losing control starts to grow, spreading slowly, like a crack they can no longer repair. That is why, the moment you go silent, a series of dangerous psychological reactions begins to form, subtle but strong enough to pull you back in if you're not careful. These reactions make many people believe maybe they've changed, when in truth, the narcissist is only reacting to the loss of the fuel that once kept their ego alive. In today's video, we're going to step into the deadliest stage. What truly happens inside a narcissist the moment they realize you are gone, and why this stage determines whether you finally break free or get pulled back into their world once again. To understand what happens right after you walk away, you must confront a truth that many people overlook. A narcissist doesn't hurt because they lost you. They hurt because they lost their control over you. That distinction is small, but it determines everything that follows, because for them, love has never been about connection, it has always been about power. When you step out of their orbit, they do not lose a partner, they lose their survival mechanism, their source of validation, the mirror that kept their identity intact. And when a person loses the thing that makes them feel alive, what rises is not regret, but the rawest part of their inner darkness. At first, they try to stay composed, convincing themselves your silence is just another one of your emotional cycles. But once every sign, every reaction, every pattern they used to rely on disappears completely, their quiet panic mutates into rage. Outsiders might think this anger comes from heartbreak, but in reality, it is the fury of entitlement being stripped away. Narcissists are used to being at the center, used to your emotions rotating around them, used to the way a single word or gesture could make you soften. When you walk away, and all those unspoken privileges vanish, they have no idea how to face the truth that their power is gone. From here, their anger grows not from longing but from the collapse of control. They can no longer predict your reactions, shape your feelings, or use silence as punishment. They lose their ability to make you blame yourself or bend to their emotional demands. And every one of these losses fuels what psychology calls narcissistic rage, the explosion that occurs when a fragile ego realizes it is no longer in charge. In this rage, they deny you have truly left, lash out without reason, repeatedly ask why, blame you entirely, and rewrite the narrative so they become the victim and you become the cold, heartless destroyer. This rage is not the weakness of a wounded heart, it is the scream of an ego that once expected devotion, now forced to face its own irrelevance. And from that very fear, we move into an even more dangerous stage, where their anger no longer erupts outward, but transforms into a calculated strategy designed to pull you back under their influence. Once the first wave of rage settles, the narcissist notices something even more terrifying than your departure, your lack of reaction. You don't tremble. You don't chase after answers. You don't fall back into the emotional cycle they once controlled so effortlessly. Your steady silence tells them something they can no longer deny. Their power over you is fading rapidly. And when a narcissist feels their power slipping away, they turn to their most dangerous weapon, hoovering. This time, hoovering isn't a quick apology or a soft message meant to guilt-trip you. This time, it is crafted from every piece of emotional data they collected throughout the relationship. Because during your time with them, they watched everything. The way your eyes shift when you're happy, the tone of your voice when you're hurt, the words you use when you're insecure, the memories that make your chest tighten. To them, these were never signs of intimacy. They were coordinates on a map of your emotional nervous system. When they hoover you now, they reopen that map, tracing every soft spot, every unhealed memory, every moment of vulnerability to find a way back in. They know exactly which memories soften your heart. They know when you're most fragile. They know that deep down, you once believed they could change, and they weaponize those very truths to construct a new performance, a polished, remorseful version of themselves they think you can't resist. Hoovering at this stage is dangerous not because of sweetness or nostalgia, but because it targets the most beautiful parts of you, your empathy, your longing, your belief in healing and redemption. Yet behind all of it, their goal remains unchanged. Reclaim the power they lost, and they will play any role necessary to get it back. Yet the real danger begins here, when their hoovering evolves into a far more sophisticated form, one that no longer targets just your memories, but the very qualities that make you a kind, empathetic, emotionally attuned human being. Because once a narcissist realizes you are no longer easily swayed, they immediately shift their strategy. Instead of obvious begging or pleading, they adopt a carefully crafted false sincerity. You'll notice they start using gentle language, reflective tones, even bits of self-blame, all designed to make you believe they have finally looked inward. But if you pay close attention, you'll see something crucial. Almost everything they say revolves around themselves, their loneliness, their emptiness, their so-called efforts to change. There is rarely any genuine acknowledgement of your pain, and almost never a clear, consistent commitment to real behavioral change. This stage of hoovering strikes directly at the heart of empathetic individuals, those who love through memory, nuance, emotional depth, and the desire to feel seen. They revive the good days, the warmth, the tenderness, the early hope. They plant the thought that maybe this time it will be different. But this is only the first layer of a multi-tiered performance. The second is remorse, the third is supposed self-awareness, and the fourth, thin but incredibly dangerous, is the subtle suggestion that you were also at fault for leaving. All of this is orchestrated to make you question yourself. Am I being too rigid? Am I abandoning someone who truly wants to change? If I don't respond, does that make me a cruel person? That hesitation is the doorway they want to pry open. And once you waver, they step through softly, slowly, but with sharp calculation to pull you back into the old role you once played. What you must never forget is this: they don't hurt because they hurt you. They hurt because they lost the mirror that fed their sense of self. Every move they make now is simply an attempt to reclaim the emotional fuel they believe they are entitled to. And even more subtly, they begin attacking not just your memories or your timing, but your moral core, your sense of responsibility, your desire to help, your fear of hurting someone who appears vulnerable. This is where many people start slipping back without realizing it. A narcissist knows you are not the type to abandon others, so they create situations that make you hesitate. Messages about how they're struggling, stories about their wounded childhood, confessions like, "I never learned how to love properly," or apologies that sound deeply sincere. But the true purpose of these words is not reconciliation. It is to pull you into the tension between compassion and self-protection. Because they know that the moment you feel even slightly responsible for their pain, the door you closed begins to crack open. At the same time, they deploy another tactic, making you believe this time is different. They talk about therapy, self-awareness, healing journeys. They describe themselves as if they've awakened, as if they finally understand their patterns, as if they are ready to grow. And for someone who once loved with their whole heart, these words can feel like a long-awaited ray of hope. But behind that hopeful facade lies a glaring absence, true responsibility. They do not acknowledge your suffering. They offer no concrete action to repair the damage, and they do not respect the boundaries you set to protect yourself. In reality, they are changing tactics, not changing character. An unhealed ego, no matter how gentle its language becomes, will always try to maintain its old structure. Or, in other words, they are trying to reclaim their role in your life, not become a better human being. If they genuinely saw their own darkness, they wouldn't push their way back into your world. They would respect your decision even if respecting it meant losing you forever. But narcissists do not operate that way. They are not afraid of losing you. They are afraid of losing the version of themselves that only existed through you. And in that very moment, when hoovering begins to lose its grip, something both fascinating and dangerous unfolds. The romantic fog they wrapped everything in starts to evaporate, revealing the raw power structure underneath. A narcissist cannot tolerate being pushed out of the center, so the second they sense you are no longer wavering, no longer trembling, no longer flinching at every carefully crafted sentence, they shift immediately. From pleading to irritation, from sweetness to sarcasm, from "I miss you" to "you're so cruel," from "I was wrong" to "you're not perfect either." This shift isn't random, it's the mask slipping. Because when you stop reacting, they lose the fuel that feeds their ego. And when that fuel disappears abruptly, the narcissistic self begins to panic. They finally realize that the sweet words no longer work, the familiar strategies no longer land. The emotional buttons they used to press now produce nothing. To them, this isn't just failure, it is the collapse of power. From there, they shift into a far more dangerous version, cold, fragmented, cutting. They begin rewriting the narrative, turning themselves into the victim and you into the villain. They tell others you were too sensitive, too confusing, too distant. They fabricate reasons to justify why you left, not because the reasons are true, but because their ego needs protection. This isn't clarity, it is survival mode. What they never expect is that by holding your silence, you step into the strongest version of yourself. You are no longer pulled by old memories, no longer guilt-driven, no longer responsible for healing wounds they refuse to face. And as your compassion matures into compassion with boundaries, every hoovering tactic collapses. In the end, you see the truth clearly. Hoovering was never an expression of love. It was an expression of fear. And when you stop responding, their darkness loses its anchor. You're not just escaping the cycle. You're reclaiming the very power they never imagined you could take back. But the tragedy doesn't end there. Because once a narcissist fails to find you in someone new, an even larger void begins to open inside them. It is the moment they are forced to confront a truth they were never prepared to face. No one can step into the role you once held, not because you were perfect, but because they never truly connected with anyone other than themselves. And when every attempt at seduction, performance, or ideal lover fails, they slip into an identity collapse. For them, every new relationship is not a beginning, but a desperate experiment, an attempt to recreate the emotional experience they once had with you. But when every experiment falls apart, they must face their greatest fear, themselves. With no new partner to blame, no you to mirror them, no audience left to perform for, the mask begins to crack in the hollowness of their own silence. And when they have nowhere left to run, the narcissistic ego plummets into a dark, echoing void where every sound is the reflection of its own emptiness. In this state, they lose direction entirely. They try to reclaim familiarity through old tactics, tightening control over the new person, demanding more, withdrawing, and exploding in cycles. Yet none of these weapons work anymore. The new person isn't invested enough to be trapped, and you have vanished into an impenetrable silence. So every move they make only exposes how empty they truly feel. Then, at the deepest point of this emotional crash, something like a reverse haunting occurs. Your image returns to them as a ghost, not because they miss you, but because you were once the only place where they temporarily felt real. Now that they cannot recreate that experience with anyone else, they spiral into restlessness, insomnia, agitation, and frustrated disbelief that the world no longer bends to their will. This is the moment the narcissist must face the truth they have avoided their entire life. The void is not out there, it is inside them. And with no one left to cling to, they descend into a darkness they have no tools to navigate. And when every layer of disguise finally falls away, one truth stands unmistakably clear. A narcissist's return has never been an invitation of love. It is merely the desperate reflex of an ego that cannot exist without being witnessed. They come back not because you matter, but because they mattered to themselves in a way that only you once enabled. This is precisely the moment where you must stay most clear-minded. Because when they approach you in that quiet, softened, almost awakened form, that is often their most dangerous version. They know you have grown stronger. They know apologies no longer sway you. They know you've begun to recognize your own worth. So they choose the one strategy that could still make you hesitate: strategic vulnerability. But you, the present you, the one who has walked through the storm, who has seen the pattern, who knows how you slowly disappeared in that relationship, you are no longer their mirror. You are no longer the open doorway for them to enter and stabilize the collapse happening inside them. And in the very moment you hold your silence, your boundaries, your clarity, you begin to see what you couldn't see before. You were never responsible for fixing their broken self. If they truly wanted to change, they would begin that journey on their own, without using you as a crutch, without dragging you back into an emotional vortex, just to soften the emptiness inside them. And if they return only to re-experience the version of themselves that surfaced when you were beside them, that responsibility no longer belongs to you. The most important truth to remember is this: they don't fear losing you. They fear losing the version of themselves that only existed when you were there. And once you understand that, no version of their return will ever intimidate you again. You have crossed a threshold they never imagined you could. You have seen the truth, and that truth is your liberation. You do not owe them a reunion. You do not owe them another chance. You do not owe them an explanation. You owe yourself peace. And that is what finally ends the cycle.